Welcome to the deep dive. Today we've got something, well, pretty unique, a source stack that links historical monarchies and deep cultural roots, all the way to cutting-edge AI technology. It's quite a leap. We're diving into excerpts from Romantina, AI, Brazilian History and Linguistic Unity by Paul Yee. Our mission really is to explore this dual vision he presents. First, there's this intense historical critique of Brazil swapping its monarchy for a republic back in 1889. And second, there's this modern solution, an AI linguistic bridge called Romantina, or Romansina.
It really is an amazing connection he draws. The whole argument seems to rest on this idea that civility, whether it's political or, linguistic, it needs deep organic roots. He argues that if you just import an ideology like republicanism in 1889, well, it didn't fit Brazil and you got chaos. And the parallel today is if we let one language dominate everything, like a linguistic import, we risk a kind of global cultural instability. So the past sacrifice, the historical critique, it kind of sets the stage for the future gift, the technology.
Okay, let's start with that history then. The critique. Our source material comes from Paul Yee. He's got an interesting background himself. Part of the Chinese diaspora, lived 50 years in Brazil, 10 in Macau. It's quite a perspective. And he kicks things off with a pretty provocative question about Latin America. Was all that republicanism genuinely about oppression, or was it more just following an ideological trend?
And Yee's answer, at least for Brazil, is quite clear. He leans towards the latter. He frames the 1889 event, the removal of Emperor Dom Pedro II, not as some popular uprising, but as a military coup. A political shortcut, really. It was bloodless, sure. But crucially, he says it lacks support, either popular or from the elites. And its main effect, it just shattered the institutional continuity they'd built up over decades.
But you have to wonder, though, for a coup to stick, even a military one, wasn't there some level of discontent? Is there a risk? This view is a bit romanticized, focusing only on the stability lost.
That's a fair challenge. And the source doesn't entirely ignore the internal issues, but it emphasizes that the monarchy's, let's call it institutional wisdom, was so crucial that getting rid of it was a massive blunder. Just look at what's attributed to Dom Pedro II himself. His foresight, he's quoted, apparently predicting the problems. Brazil is not yet ready for a republic, while freed slaves cannot yet read and write to choose candidates.
Wow. That's incredibly prescient. He saw that you can't just flip a switch to democracy without an educated population ready for suffrage.
Exactly. And his actions, according to you, showed this deep commitment to stability and, importantly, justice. The source calls it his institutional genius, especially around abolition. He apparently made it a policy not to appoint senators who own slaves. He was using his power strategically to weaken the slave-owning bloc politically. A long game. The idea was a peaceful, gradual end to slavery, not immediate rupture.
And then the final act, the Golden Law ending slavery, that came from Princess Isabel. The source really highlights her moral stance. Quotes her asking, basically, haven't these people suffered enough? Have they not abused these laborers long enough? That's less politics, more pure morality, undercutting the elite's whole economic base.
Right. But the Republic's reaction to all this, the source paints it as, well, deeply ungrateful, the imperial family. Banished, no compensation. Empress Teresa Cristina reportedly died soon after, basically from grief. Yet even in exile, Dom Pedro II's famous last words were, "Eu amo o Brasil, I love Brazil, duty over bitterness."
So, okay, the monarchy with its stability is gone, replaced by this imported system. What did that cost Brazil, according to Yee? What followed?
His summary isn't pretty. The source argues the power vacuum wasn't filled by stable democracy. Instead, you got oligarchy, cycles of really ingrained corruption, and repeated military interventions, culminating in the long dictatorship from 64 to 85. The core argument is the 1889 coup wasn't just about changing leaders. It replaced a working, evolved system with a fragile idea the country couldn't yet support, leading to, well, a century of turmoil.
Okay, that sets up the second part nicely. If the Republic wasn't the source of Brazil's greatness, where does Ye find it? What are the real organic roots of Brazil's resilience and identity, according to him?
He points to 4 foundational groups, all active before the Republic, and this is key. He sees them as examples of organic, multicultural institution building, not imported ideology.
All right, let's break them down. Group 1, the Jesuits, active from 1549 to 1759. What was their contribution?
Well, they were arguably the first big linguistic bridge builders there. They didn't just force Portuguese on everyone. They actually created Ningantu. It was like a standardized version of Tupi-Guarani used as a common language, a lingua franca, across the Amazon. For trade, for evangelism, they organized communities, built cohesion using language. You can see the parallel to Romantina already, right?
Interesting. Okay, then from Jesuits to sailors and financiers. The Templars, or rather their successors, the Order of Christ.
Exactly. This brings in the money and the maritime skill needed for exploration and colonization. The Order of Christ, it funded voyages, provided navigational know-how, and that famous symbol on the sails, the double cross, white over red, it wasn't just religious. It represented centuries of financial backing, exploration, stability, deep institutional power.
The third group is more subtle, Portuguese tolerance. What's that referring to specifically?
It's about the practical inclusion of groups often excluded elsewhere. Mozarov's Christians who lived under Muslim rule in Iberia, Wudajar's Muslims in Christian Iberia, and importantly, Conversa's Jews forced to convert. These groups held vital skills, cartography, astronomy, navigation, absolutely critical for a global empire. So, incorporating them rather than expelling them gave Portugal, and thus Brazil, a knowledge edge, a kind of multicultural competence from the start.
And finally, the monarchy itself, the House of Braganza. They brought it all together.
Yi credits them with providing continuity and, crucially, investment for the long haul. They were the political structure that enabled big projects. Dom Juan VI, when he moved the court to Rio, he apparently invested something like 20 billion in today's currency. Huge sums. Dom Pedro I achieved independence relatively peacefully. And Dom Pedro II, well, he provided nearly half a century of stable, progressive rule, focused on education and ultimately abolition. So it's presented as this long period of organic growth, deliberately contrasted with the century of instability that followed the coup.
Okay, so that historical analysis, criticizing imported systems, celebrating organic growth, it's the philosophical fuel for the modern part. Let's pivot completely now to Romantina, this AI linguistic bridge, designed specifically to avoid reliance on any single dominant language like English today.
Right. And this is where the historical critique directly informs the tech design. The AI is meant to be a tool, a servant of communication, not its master. And the rollout plan is very deliberate, phased, to build critical mass without forcing it on anyone.
Walk us through those phases. This sequence seems important.
Phase 1 is about proving the concept at scale. It tackles the current giants. Chinese with its, 1.3 billion speakers and English around 1.5 billion. If the AI can bridge those massive, structurally different language groups effectively, it proves the core tech works.
Then phase 2, the Romance integration. This feels like the heart of it, culturally speaking.
It really is. It ties directly back to the Portuguese and Latin heritage. This adds Portuguese, 280 million speakers, Spanish, 500 million, French, another 280 million, Italian, 85 million. You're adding another 1.2 billion potential users just in that phase. The goal is connecting cultures with shared linguistic roots first. Makes sense.
And phase 3, that sounds ambitious.
Hugely. The goal is to get the network functioning for 1.6 to 1.8 billion people, which, as the source points out, is more than half the world's population. But honestly, what makes Romantina stand out isn't just the scale, it's the how, the principles behind it.
Yes, let's talk about those principles. They seem like a direct response, almost an antidote to how big tech usually operates. What jumps out?
Well, the most radical thing is the first principle, zero commercial motive. It's explicitly called a pure gift, not freemium, not ad-supported, a gift. It has to be an open platform, public documentation, transparency. The aim is connection, period, not profit.
And this idea of cultural sovereignty, giving all languages equal dignity, that resonates directly with the historical critique, doesn't it? The fear of a dominant culture overriding local ones.
Exactly. The AI is designed as a bridge, purely a connector. It ensures no single language becomes the default, the hegemon. But, that does raise a really interesting technical challenge. How does an AI actually do that? Translate between, say, tonal Chinese and inflected Portuguese while respecting sovereignty. The source implies it's about deep linguistic analysis, preserving nuance, not just flattening everything into, say, an English-like structure.
Which leads us to the personal story behind it all, the philosophy, the abrazo, the embrace.
Yes, Paul Yu's own life story closes the circle here. It's quite remarkable. He graduated back in 1966 from a school, Colégio São Joaquim, in Lorena, Brazil. And this school, it was founded by Princess Isabel herself. She invited the Salesian order from Turin, Italy, to run it in 1888, right around the time of abolition.
Wow. So you could literally trace this thread. Matteo Ricci's Jesuits in Macau, centuries ago, the Jesuit missions in Brazil, Princess Isabel bringing the Salesians for education in 1888, Paul Yee getting educated there in 1966, and now this Romantina project planned as a gift for 2025. That's like an unbroken chain of knowledge sharing.
Absolutely. And that Salesian connection brings in their motto, Da mihi animas setratole. Give me souls, take away the rest. It's the philosophical core.
And Yee reinterprets that motto for the AI age, doesn't he? It
Oh.
becomes the project's ethical code, based on giving, on sacrifice.
Precisely. It's like give connection, take away linguistic dominance, give calor humano, that human warmth Brazil is known for, take away cold corporate algorithms, give dignity to all cultures, take away hegemony, give education through connection, take away the profit motive. It flips the usual tech model completely on its head. The AI serves human connection, nothing else.
You mentioned Macau earlier, and there was this fascinating detail in the notes about Yee discovering tonal Latin in Gregorian chants there. That sounds counterintuitive. What could that possibly mean, and how does it feed into this AI?
That's a really deep cut in the source material, isn't it? It hints at the level of linguistic insight involved. Macau's unique history, Portuguese, Chinese, Jesuit presence. It's a linguistic crossroads. Apparently, Yi found parallels between the tonal structures of ancient Chinese and the melodic pitch patterns, the stresses, in how Latin was sung in Gregorian chant. The implication is profound, that by understanding the deep historical musicality and tonality of languages, you can find architectural bridges between language families that seem totally unrelated, like Chinese and Romance languages. This isn't just about swapping words, it's about mapping deep phonological and prosodic structures.
Okay, so that's likely part of the how for achieving cultural sovereignty in translation. It respects the underlying music of the language, which makes sense why the whole project is called the abrazo, the embrace. The source even lists who this gift is intended to honor.
Yes, it's very specific. It's framed as an act of profound gratitude. It honors Brazil for those 50 years of calor humano he experienced. Macau for the linguistic insights, like that tonal Latin discovery. Portugal and China connecting historical threads. The Braganças in exile sort of redeeming their historical sacrifice. And ultimately, he says, it honors all humanity, offering communication without one group dominating another.
Even the symbol chosen, that Order of Christ's cross, carries historical weight. The colors, too.
Right. Green for Brazil's hope in forests, red for the Templar legacy of courage and sacrifice, white for transformation for Christ. And the timing is symbolic, too. A bicentennial nod to Dom Pedro II's birth year, 1825, and a personal jubilee gift, Yee's 50 years in Brazil. The motto sums it all up. Abraço ao mundo, an embrace to the world.
So when you pull it all together, this whole declaration, it's basically using a critique of 19th century political failure, that important coup, to justify a vision for 21st century cultural stability achieved through ethical technology. Communication without domination, rooted in deep respect for organic culture. That's the essence.
And what's really striking, I think, is just the sheer audacity of the model itself.
And that brings us back to you, our listener. Here's the final thought to chew on. The source material deliberately positions Romantina as this pure gift to humanity, zero commercial motive. Now, we live in a world where essential digital tools, especially language tools, are overwhelmingly run by big tech. Companies often driven by profit, by data monetization, building monopolies. So what does it really mean to propose a vital utility like a universal linguistic bridge as purely a sacrifice? An act of gratitude, a perpetual gift. Is that non-commercial model even viable for something as complex and global as this AI? Or does it demand a kind of radical, maybe even spiritual commitment that only a unique, philosophically driven project like this could even attempt? Something to think about as you navigate the world of digital communication and knowledge sharing.